Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. As always, make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com, and share this episode with family and friends and on social media because people need to stay ahead of the curve. And the world is a powder keg right now. One little spark, that's all it needs to explode. We see the war against Hamas, it's heating up, and as of this recording, we haven't seen the Israeli ground invasion start yet, but it does appear to be imminent. And I could assure you that there will be a lot of death on both sides. This will be ugly and bloody. And sadly, many innocent civilians are going to be the result of collateral damage. It begs the question, why do so many people put up with terrorist organizations like Hamas? It really is mind-boggling to me. Not for nothing, but when it comes to the Palestinians, everyone's saying that Israel has to show restraint, but Hamas has done more damage to the Palestinians than any one person or one group or one nation. I mean, think of the location of Gaza. They're right on the Mediterranean. Could be a major tourism hub. They received billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in aid over the last decade, and yet it remains one of the poorest areas in the entire world. Why is that? Now, some will argue, it's because of a blockade that's imposed, particularly by America and Israel, on shipments to Gaza. But why is there a blockade? Not for nothing. If Hamas renounced its violent, bloodthirsty ways with the savages that they are, if they revised their charter, that blockade would have been lifted years ago. And if the Arab world really cared about the plight of the Palestinians, why have they all sealed off their borders? Why have they refused to accept any Palestinian refugees? You know, there is a lot going on when it comes to this conflict. And unfortunately, people's passions get inflamed. They let their emotion get the best of them. As an American, what we should be paying attention to is that we are witnessing the conflict expand, something I warned about last week. And believe me, there are many who are salivating at the opportunity. Here in the United States, we are seeing increased military activity in northern Israel on the border with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is far more competent, far more sophisticated than Hamas. Hezbollah is firing rockets, anti-tank weaponry. Israel's responded by hitting these targets. Now, it hasn't erupted into all-out war, but the potential for a new front exists. We also saw Israel conduct a strike on the Aleppo air base in Syria. Now, this air base serves as a major hub for Iranian weaponry. And according to reports, Iran was making weapons delivery. This isn't the first time Israel launched attacks within Syria to destroy Iranian weaponry. Iran's hands are all over this, and Israel has had to do this numerous times over the last decade. Now, the situation changed today. We have to look at these actions under a microscope in order to determine whether the geographical boundaries of this conflict are expanding. And it's also important to note that when Israel struck over the last 10 years, Syria was in a civil war once the Arab Spring broke out. So when Israel struck Syria in the past, there was little the Assad regime could do to respond. Assad couldn't afford to antagonize Israel as the country was mired in a civil war. Now, technically, the civil war is still going on, but Assad's grip on power is relatively stable. And then when it comes to the strike the other day on Iranian weaponry, we don't know if those weapons were intended for Hezbollah or Hamas, but it's irrelevant. What is relevant is how Iran is the biggest backer of state-sponsored terrorism, how they've spent millions upon millions of dollars funding, arming, and training these terrorist organizations. Iran continues to make moves. They continue to make threats towards Israel. You had the Iranian foreign minister warn that if Israel invades Gaza, no one's going to prevent the conflict from spreading. And then you have Iran sending a message to Israel over the weekend where they stated that they don't want to see escalation, but they will intervene if the Israeli operation in Gaza continues. Now, when we look at the United States, we just dispatched a second carrier group and fighter jets to the region, 2,000 Marines also going. This is important because you have to pay attention. It's not cheap to move all this equipment around, and you consider that each carrier group consists of one aircraft carrier, one or two guided missile cruisers, 2 to 3 naval destroyers, some even include attack submarines. You are talking about a lot of naval power in this region. And I'm not even including the 60 to 90 fighter jets that are on these aircraft carriers. You know, the administration announced that the warships are not intended to join the attack in Gaza. and they're meant to serve as a deterrent to Iran and its proxies in the region. But if it does expand, which some are hoping for, remember, our military readiness levels are at their lowest since pre-World War II. We are not in a strong position right now because many within leadership have failed. Sure, we still have a dominant military, but the failed foreign policy experts, the posers, they that pretend to act like military leaders, they have decimated our military. They've destroyed the morale of the troops. Now, as it stands, you have the conflict in Gaza, it's growing conflict on the northern border with Hezbollah, potential conflict in northeast of Israel with Syria, especially when you look at the Golan Heights region. That's 3 different fronts, and from there, who knows? But there is something that's been bugging me for the last several days. Terrorist organizations like Hamas, they're not stupid. You know, we can't say they're smart. Apparently, if you say they're smart, then you get attacked and criticized. But they may operate crudely, they may be savages, but they're sophisticated, they're patient, and they're well organized. They are fully aware that the attack they conducted on Israel was going to provoke a reaction. That's what happens with terrorist attacks. It provokes reactions. And I'm wondering if something bigger is going on. Hear me out. You have the deadly and cowardly attack on innocent civilians at the hands of Hamas, which had to take months, maybe even over a year of planning and training. They definitely had outside assistance. Obviously, all eyes are on Iran with that. When Hamas ordered the attack, they had to know that there would be an enormous military response by Israel. It's not like Israel was going to say, hey, just give back the hostages you kidnapped and we're not going to attack. We're going to give you a pass this time. They knew that the Israeli response would be massive. And what concerns me is, what are we missing? As I said, the Hamas attack took months of planning and training, if not longer. This means that Hamas had months to prepare for an Israeli invasion. Urban warfare, it's difficult enough. We saw how difficult it was in Fallujah, Iraq. But imagine Hamas having months to set up booby traps. Imagine all the IEDs littered throughout Gaza. And I could assure you that this is going to get bloody. I think that's why Israel hasn't rushed to do the ground invasion yet. I think that's why they're just amassing the troops. They're trying to collect intel. But what if there's more to it? What if it's a trap? Now, this is me just speculating out loud, but when you're in emergency management, you try and think and prepare for the worst possible scenario, because the better prepared you are for the worst, the better off you'll be. And so what if the Hamas attack was meant to distract Israel for something much larger going on? What if they're trying to draw the majority of Israeli forces to the south, leave Israel vulnerable in the north? Or what if Iran provided Hamas with a crude nuclear bomb? I'm not saying that this is true, but would you really put it out of realm of possibilities? And if you do just dismiss that, well, then that's on you. Just think, from 2006 to 2010, estimates were that Iran was only a year or two away from developing enough nuclear material to make a nuclear bomb. Some estimates did have it at the 5-year mark. Now, fast forward 13 to 15 years later. Now the estimates are between 6 months to a year. Well, what if they already have one or several nukes? Don't forget, our intel agencies failed when it came to the advancements of the North Korean nuclear program. They said North Korea was decades away from developing a nuclear bomb. And they did it. North Korea was years away from being able to put it on a warhead. And they did it. North Korea was years away from developing an intercontinental ballistic missile. And they did it. And it's not just North Korea. I mean, we underestimated Gaddafi's nuclear program in Libya. What if, and I get that it is a big what if, but what if the attack on Israel was intended to draw in a large portion of the Israeli military only to detonate a crude nuke once in Gaza? Does anyone really put it past Hamas that they would do something like this if they had the capability? I mean, these savages have no regard for human life, and understand, when groups like Hamas are backed into a corner and threatened with extermination, as they should be eradicated from the face of this earth, they're going to lash out, whatever means they have. They will do whatever they can. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is going to happen. It's one possible scenario out of many. But you cannot deny that something seems a little odd here, that Hamas would conduct a large-scale attack and not expect a massive retaliation by Israel. It's clear these savages are looking to destroy Israel. And it's clear that they don't care about anyone. They don't care about the Palestinians. They will slaughter anyone who stands in their way of their hardcore radical Islamic beliefs. Remember, These fanatical groups have killed far more Muslims than anyone else. And just look at how they are blocking the roadways, preventing Palestinians from evacuating Gaza because they like the human shields. They want Palestinians dead because they want to be able to show it to the world. Look at what the horrible Israelis are doing. That's how little they care about Palestinians, that they use them as pawns, human shields. And then you have morons in this country defending Hamas. And I'll talk more about that when we get back from this quick break. When things go sideways, you want to be prepared. Protect you and your family. And people are concerned. They might have to go for a long time without food, electricity. That's why I want to introduce you to 4patriots.com. Get preparedness products you could use now, and that could save your life later. My favorite is 4Patriots' new solar generator, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It uses the endless free power of the sun to power your lights, your TV, medical equipment, even run your fridge. Plus, it's expandable and comes with a free solar panel. Or you can pick up one of 4Patriots' best-selling survival food kits. Delicious tasting and designed to last for 25 years. They even have kits with real meat. And if the power's out, no worries. Just boil water over a fire, simmer, and serve. You're going to enjoy a hot meal and stay safe in a crisis. More smart people than ever are finding 4Patriots. Over 2 million customers trust them, and you might have even seen them on TV. I had the folks at 4Patriots set up a special page for you at 4patriots.com/PAS so that listeners of this podcast can see this week's discounts and deals before they go away. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS, but you gotta hurry because the deals don't last long. So save more money, get peace of mind, and protect you and your family. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, I said that there are so many morons here in the United States that are either defending Hamas or passively condoning the slaughter of innocent civilians. And it's striking to me because the reaction by so many here within our country, people who literally are clueless to the whole Israeli-Palestinian issue, people who know nothing about the history of Hamas, people who know absolutely nothing about history and regurgitate BS narratives that have no relation to the truth. Today, so many people deny basic truths and they attempt to recreate their own historical narratives. And that's what I find disgraceful. You have people that can't even muster up a simple condemnation of Hamas, and they should be ashamed of themselves because it's really not that hard. You have Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who won't answer any questions. You have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar accusing Israel of human rights abuses on Twitter, or X now, and she's posting pictures and stories that have been completely debunked, and yet she's still pushing her own misinformation. Remember, these are the same people that want the government to control speech. They're the same people that want the government to censor any speech that they deem as misinformation and disinformation. Congresswoman Omar just declared Jim Jordan, a congressman, a congressman of the United States, a terrorist, and yet she won't even muster up the word terrorist when relating it to Hamas. Tells you everything you need to know about her. Then you have this idiot, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Our responsibility is to the stability and the security of the region. That means being able to support yes, Israel in its defensive capacities, right? In its ability in that context. But it also means that the United States has a responsibility to ensure accountability to human rights, to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to ensure that horrors do not happen in the names of victims who do not want their tragedy used to justify further violence and injustice.
Right.
This is a United States Congresswoman. But she doesn't care about pushing disinformation. Remember, this is the same moron that said this.
So listen up. This is really important. Bigotry requires disinformation.
Not for nothing, but she's lobbing a serious accusation at our ally, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only free country in the Middle East. And not only does she not provide any evidence to back up her claims of an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, she forgets that the only groups that regularly threaten ethnic cleansing on a daily basis are Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian mullahs. They're the ones that threaten this every single day. They're the ones that have made it a goal. It's actually one of their policy objectives is to exterminate Israelis and exterminate Israel. And if they had the means to do it, does anyone really believe that they would hesitate? I mean, Hamas's whole existence, the reason it was formed in the first place in 1988, it's right in their charter that they seek to eradicate Israel and the Jews. When groups have a genocidal agenda, you may want to pay attention to that, Congresswoman AOC. You may want to take them seriously. You may want to take them at their word because they actually mean it. And I'm not sure what's more terrifying, that people believe the BS she puts out there, or the fact that someone like this is in a position of power. And then you have others saying that Israel has no right to defend itself, or that the response that Israel provides must be proportional to the Hamas attacks. So what does that even mean, proportional? Like, what would we do here in the United States if someone conducted this level of attack? Because I remember on 9/11, we went to war in two countries when we were attacked. And the difference between Israel and Hamas is that Israel will try and prevent civilian casualties. It doesn't mean that civilians aren't going to die. They certainly will. It's the nature of war. It's friggin' brutal. But would we be discussing this today had Hamas not conducted the initial attack to begin with? But it's not just the AOCs of the world. And I'm going to explain that when we get back from this quick break. Welcome back, everyone. So it's not just Democrats in Congress. You have just about every far-left organization in America's college campuses throwing their lot behind Hamas. It's ironic that these are the same groups constantly accusing conservatives and Republicans as fascists, but apparently they view Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran as the beacons of democracy and freedom. I mean, isn't that amazing? These are the same people who are quick to bash America on just every single issue. They constantly label America as racist, as evil, yet they won't even condemn the mass slaughter perpetrated by Hamas. It's terrifying when you think about it. Imagine all these public virtue signalers who pledged allegiance to Black Lives Matter organization as they exploited the death of George Floyd, declared that anyone who doesn't bow to BLM and call for the defunding of the police as racist. Apparently, when they criticized the retort that all lives matter, apparently they really meant it. To them, some lives are more important than other lives. And they continue to defend Hamas, and some go so far as to equate the innocent victims that aren't just Israeli. Numerous countries, including Americans. Don't forget, 30 Americans have died. Several Americans are being held hostage right now. And yet they make it as if Hamas are the innocent victims. And the victims, the actual victims, well, they're the guilty ones. They're attempting to create a false moral equivalency by saying that we have to look at both sides of the issue. And no, we don't. I'm sorry. When a group is slaughtering innocent men, women, children, and babies, I don't need to look at both sides of this issue. And those that try and justify Hamas's actions are baffling, because you can be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and still criticize Hamas. It's really not that hard. It's not hard at all. It's actually pretty simple to condemn Hamas. And anyone who tries to bring up the Palestinians, again, understand, Hamas has done more harm to Palestinians than any group, any nation. You can be sympathetic to innocent Palestinians, but when you sit there and defend Hamas, you are part of the problem. Because it shouldn't be hard to criticize that. The response, it has to be proportional. Proportional to what? War is war. And Hamas, again, they killed 30 Americans. They're holding others hostage. Now, we as a nation are within our rights to strike Hamas if we chose to do so. We would be fully within our right to do that. We're not going to, because we don't want to get mired in this just yet. Some do, believe me. Okay, the defense industry, they're drooling, they're salivating right now. The neocons are salivating right now. Oh, this is our opportunity to take out Iran. But what I'm saying is that we would be in our rights to do that. Now, Israel is within their rights to go after this terrorist organization that attacked them. And our college campuses, they've become cesspools of radical extremism. Over the last week, we've witnessed a bunch of spoiled virtue signaling brats who have little grasp on history. These people don't know much. But what they believe in is their own self-righteousness. That's what they believe in. And they go out of their way to defend Hamas. Take a listen to this clip.
Glory to the martyrs! Glory to the martyrs! Do you know what we say when we say, we will liberate the land? There you go. We will liberate the land by any means necessary. We will liberate the land! By any means necessary.
Just listen to what they're chanting. Glory to the martyrs. Glory to the resistance. We will liberate the lands by any means necessary. So they're exclaiming that Hamas is justified and Israel deserves to be attacked. More specifically, innocent men, women, children, and babies that were killed are legitimate targets because resistance by any means necessary is justified in their opinion. That was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but we're seeing the same thing play out on college campuses nationwide. Take a listen to these useful idiots.
They got tanks, we got hang gliders. They got tanks, we got hang gliders. Glory to the resistance fighters. Glory to the resistance fighters. Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
They have tanks, we have hang gliders. They have tanks, we have hang gliders. That's what they're saying. And again, I could play clip after clip after clip on college campuses throughout the country, but we'll be here all day. And it's not like these people are advocating for Palestinians. These are terrorist sympathizers. But don't worry, because as the world burns, as threats are increasing, as our border remains wide open, and our college campuses are creating the next generation of radicals, the FBI has set their sights on the real threats. You know, parents attending school board meetings, traditional Catholics that attend Mass, and let's not forget about all the dangerous Trump supporters, because MAGA now has its own threat tag. You know, when you look at the FBI, they have an impeccable sense of priorities. Now, it would be one thing if just a handful of people were showing up at these rallies on college campuses, but that's not the case. That's not the case at all. These are actually large rallies, and that's what concerns me. You have this warped way of thinking of people defending the actions of Hamas. And then you have all these people looking at these protests on college campuses, and they're shocked at these protests. They can't believe it. So many people seem to be surprised at the reaction on college campuses throughout the country. But why? I mean, I find that reaction humorous. If you've been paying attention to campus reform myself, we've been warning about the ideological indoctrination that's been going on for decades. What did you think was going to come of this ideological indoctrination? What did you think was going to happen? Of course you were going to produce a bunch of far-left radical extremists. And then you have morons from the LGBTQ community holding signs that read, "The LGBTQ community stands with Palestinians." Does anyone want to tell these morons that Hamas and those who share the radical Islamic fundamentalist ideology don't stand with them? In fact, they slaughter people who identify as LGBTQ. Go up to a radical Islamic fundamentalist and see what they think about the transgender movement. I could guarantee you're not going to like their response. Now, I'm only joking. Don't go up to that. All right, don't push this. We don't want to see anything happen to anyone. But we see these protests on college campuses, and I will remind you that these are the same college campuses that have trigger warnings about the United States Constitution. These are the same college campuses that have trigger warnings that the American flag is offensive to some. These are the same college campuses that create safe spaces and free speech zones. So if I'm preaching about conservative values on a college campus, I'm going to be relegated to an isolated free speech zone on some obscure part of the college campus because I might trigger someone. But hey, call for the bloodshed of innocent civilians, praise Hamas as martyrs, and that's tolerable. That's acceptable. Now, they have a right to express their points of view. I'm not denying that. And I won't call for them to be silenced. In fact, I want them to open their mouths. Let them expose themselves to the fools that they are. And we have a right to expose them. When we look at it, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. And these are the same college campuses and the same idiots that scream that words are a form of violence. Yet they don't see the irony in the very things they're advocating because they are the self-anointed moral holy warriors that believe the garbage they're spewing. They don't even get their history right. Okay, understand, Hamas came to the scene in 1988. They've had control of Gaza since 2006. In 2005, Israel dismantled the Israeli settlements in Gaza. They completely disengaged from Gaza. Hamas was voted in their only election since 2006. They've received billions in aid around the world. And the Palestinians' lives have gotten worse under Hamas's rule. Gaza remains one of the poorest places in the world, despite the billions, tens of billions of dollars being located right on the Mediterranean. Maybe Hamas should put some effort into improving the lives of Palestinians in Gaza, rather than preventing them, blockading the highways so Palestinians can't flee the pending invasion. Maybe Hamas should build the infrastructure within Gaza rather than build weapons and tunnels to murder innocent people. Now, I'm not going to lie. Ordinary Palestinians are suffering, and they're going to continue to suffer, especially under Hamas rule. When it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, none of us are solving that. It's not getting resolved anytime soon. What I will say is Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that should be eradicated. But the campaign Israel is about to embark on, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be bloody. Most will not have the stomach for what we're about to see. And it's also important to note that you can never fully eradicate a terrorist organization solely through military means. You could destroy and limit their capabilities to launch future attacks, but you're not going to eradicate it. The Palestinians, it's a responsibility of theirs to thoroughly reject Hamas. If they thoroughly reject Hamas, perhaps their lives will improve. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that happen. And the brutal truth is that we will rinse, wash, repeat. This conflict is not new. It's not exclusive to Israel in a sense. You know, when we look at history, the players, the variables, the reasons may be different, but it's the same story that repeats itself. And if you were to come back 1,000 years from now, do you think that the nations that exist today would exist 1,000 years from now on a world map? Do you think all the borders will remain the same? The truth is that while nations rise and fall and wars begin and end, there is always one constant, and that's human nature. Despite all the advances in education, technology, and engineering, human beings haven't changed all that much since the beginning of recorded history. Nations have, borders have. When people talk about Palestine, I'm like, when was there ever a Palestinian state, right? It was called Israel and Judea when the Romans took it over, and it's been conquered by pretty much every major empire that has ever existed. But when the Romans took over, that's where you started to see the idea of Palestine. Israelis were called Palestinians up until the 20th century. So there's a lot people don't know, but I'm not going to get into the whole history of it because too many already are trying to oversimplify history. Too many already are trying to paint the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as black and white. They ignore the entire gray area that exists, and that's unfortunately what our dumbed-down education system has done. That we try and look at issues as if there are only two sides, when no, it's a lot more complicated than that. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please take 30 seconds to write a review and leave a 5-star rating. Also, share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. And don't forget to visit the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.